Buenas tardes, buenas tardes. Buenas tardes. Es un gran honor y un gran placer tenerles ustedes esta tarde con nosotros. Algunos de ustedes se preguntarán qué hace el Museo del Prado metido en la neurociencia. Pero yo creo que como son ustedes inteligentes, pensarán sin duda que todo el proceso de la belleza en la mente es algo que hay que estudiar. Y si no sabemos todavía qué es lo que pasa, pues yo creo que desde este museo, que no solamente pasan por aquí miles de personas todos los años, pero también hay un sostén que tiene que ver con la belleza y con el concepto de belleza. Y me parece que es muy propicio que en este momento tengamos este debate con un insigne investigador, un profesor de la Universidad de Berkeley, un doctor por la Universidad de Harvard, que tiene mucho que decirnos sobre este tema. Esta mañana, como saben ustedes, el Museo del Prado, 10 minutos antes de abrir las puertas, por una web que conocen ustedes bien, que se llama Instagram, se enseña un cuadro del museo o se hace una reflexión sobre el museo durante 10 minutos. Y esta mañana me encontré yo también con la sorpresa de que la doctora que estaba, porque está por aquí seguramente, que ha hablado también, era una neurocientífica y ha hecho una presentación maravillosa de lo que es la belleza. Si no lo han visto, vuelvan ustedes a Instagram esta mañana hasta a las 10 menos 10 y verán una bellísima presentación de qué es la belleza desde la perspectiva de un neurocientífico. Bueno, hoy vamos a hablar de eso. El Museo del Prado, como he dicho, es más que un museo y es una institución de las más importantes de España, a mi juicio, y que tiene ese sentido de tratar de acompasar todas las cosas, mirar todas las cosas. Y hemos tomado la decisión con la Fundación Tatiana de darle un espacio para reflexionar sobre la neurociencia, la belleza, etc. Y aquí estamos, es la primera, y seguiremos haciéndolo. Presidente de la Fundación Tatiana, ¿quieres decir unas palabras? Si no quieres, o quieres tú, pues venga. Bienvenidos a todos, va a ser un placer enorme.
Muchísimas gracias, querido presidente del Patronato, don Javier Solana, y sobre todo por esta oportunidad que nos da la Fundación Tatiana para agradecer la colaboración que estamos teniendo en este campo tan innovador como es la neurociencia y el arte, con un proyecto que hacemos a través del Centro Internacional de Neurociencia y Ética, un centro que la Fundación Tatiana ha creado precisamente para estimular la investigación interdisciplinar sobre el cerebro y el cerebro en su contexto real, en el contexto de la persona, no solo en el laboratorio, y que junto a toda la investigación que financiamos en ese aspecto, pues queríamos también poner nuestro granito de arena. Y para ello, pues nadie mejor que el Museo del Prado, que siempre está abierto a la innovación, a abrirse, como decía su presidente del patronato, pues a todas las realidades del mundo. Y cuando les planteamos esta posibilidad, pues hemos tenido una acogida entusiasta de hacer un programa de residencia de una persona experta en la neurociencia, desde el punto de vista de la neurofilosofía o la neurociencia biológica, para que esté aquí en el Museo del Prado, para que pueda abordar pues esas relaciones de la estética, de la experiencia creativa, de la belleza, de la historia del arte desde el punto de vista neurocientífico. Y nuestro primer invitado de este programa del Museo y la Fundación pues es el conferenciante de hoy, que no me toca a mí presentarle, pero ya verán ustedes que es una personalidad que reúne en sí mismo precisamente este carácter interdisciplinar. Él es filósofo de formación, el decano de filosofía de la Universidad de Berkeley y además ha dirigido ahí el Instituto de Ciencias Cognitivas, que ha estudiado precisamente estas relaciones con el cerebro y que es, esperemos, el primero de una serie de neurocientíficos que vengan aquí al museo. Hoy hemos tenido también con él un seminario con 20 neurocientíficos que hemos estado toda la mañana dialogando sobre estos temas y aportando pues esta visión interdisciplinar. Así que muchísimas gracias también a ustedes por su asistencia a esta conferencia y sobre todo gracias al Museo del Prado, a su presidente de su patronato, al director y a todos los profesionales que nos han ayudado y que están colaborando en esta iniciativa que pensamos que es pionera y como siempre con esa excelencia que nos da trabajar con el Museo del Prado. Así que nada más, muchísimas gracias a todos.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Javier Arnaldo, tengo a cargo el centro de estudios de este museo que se ha dedicado en parte, ¿no?, en colaboración con otros departamentos a la organización de este evento. Y permítanme sumar mis palabras de agradecimiento a las del presidente del Real Patronato y a las del director de la Fundación Tatiana, y con igual intención también de bienvenida a la cita de hoy, bienvenida que también hago extensiva a todos los que nos siguen en remoto a través del canal de YouTube que se ha habilitado para la transmisión de esta conferencia. Vamos a asistir, como bien sabemos todos, a la conferencia de Alba Noel, el primer invitado, como bien hemos escuchado, a la residencia de Neurociencia y Arte que han creado en colaboración el Museo Nacional del Prado y el Centro Internacional de Neurociencia y Ética de la Fundación Tatiana. Es una iniciativa de particular relevancia para la búsqueda de interlocución de las colecciones y de las inquietudes por el saber del Museo Nacional del Prado, con saberes que van bastante más allá de la historia del arte y que quieren dialogar igualmente con el saber científico y técnico y particularmente con esas ciencias hoy más desarrolladas o más en boga o que consideramos más punteras, como es el caso evidentemente de la neurociencia. Es algo que también nos coloca en la interdisciplinaridad del conocimiento artístico como reto de conocimiento del museo, y esto gracias al apoyo de la Fundación Tatiana. La imagen en el arte y en la inteligencia artificial es el título que escucharemos, de la conferencia que escucharemos del profesor Alba Noe, profesor de la Universidad de Berkeley y autor de libros de tanta notoriedad como uno del 2009, titulado Out of Our Heads, o el de 2015, también muy extendido, Strange Tools, Art and Human Nature. En estos y en otros títulos el profesor Noé se ocupa muy insistentemente en la relación mente-arte o digamos en el carácter central, ¿no?, que podemos observar de la actividad artística humana, de la actividad artística, digámoslo así, y digamos la modelación de la mente. El profesor Noe es miembro del Instituto de Ciencias Cognitivas y Cerebrales y se presenta a sí mismo con todo como filósofo de la mente. Su tarea se subtrae un tanto a la neurociencia propiamente dicha, pero en la jornada que hemos escuchado, que ha tenido lugar esta mañana y que él ha presidido, esta jornada científica que ha reunido expertos de todos los puntos cardinales de la geografía nacional y de también otros puntos de fuera de España y con perfiles profesionales que iban desde de los estudios fisiológicos a la ingeniería de inteligencia artificial, pero con un perfil común de neurociencia, nos ha mostrado la riqueza de ese debate, su centralidad en la discusión científica de hoy y cómo se insertan los saberes del profesor Noé en este campo. Dice filósofo de la mente y no dice filósofo del conocimiento, teórico del conocimiento, epistemólogo, filósofo de la mente. Y efectivamente podemos contrastar esa disposición con las de filósofos. Pienso, por ejemplo, en Kant, que perfectamente se le llamaba, ¿no?, psicólogo en su momento, alguien que penetra verdaderamente en el conocimiento de la mente humana. Y él no estaba por entonces así en esa disposición. Y claro, hay un factor muy determinante que hemos visto en la jornada de hoy, que es precisamente el conocimiento de el acercamiento filosófico al conocimiento, pero desde la plasticidad de la mente y por lo tanto desde su condición biológica, centralmente biológica. Esta es la maravilla, así que nos abre el discurso de la neurociencia y el discurso también de esta filosofía de la mente que encarna al profesor Noé, a quien quiero dar también las gracias y la bienvenida.
Well, thank you indeed for being here. There's a lot of you, and I'm deeply gratified to see so many of you. I'm very grateful to be here. I've had the opportunity to spend 2 weeks already here in the museum, being very well taken care of and also, I would say, instructed by the members of this museum. And I'm grateful to the Prado, I'm grateful to the Tatiana Foundation for supporting this visit as well. What could ever lead us to take seriously the idea that computers, these products of our own invention, might actually understand and think and feel, and that if not now, then maybe later, they might come to open their artificial eyes, thus finally to behold a shiny world of their very own? What might lead us to think that large language models, which are finally bits of engineering, not subjects, not individuals, can join us and participate in that part of our lives we call art? You don't need to deny the extraordinary, indeed potentially transformative power, and maybe also immense dangers, as well as opportunities, of this new technology, to reject the, I think, absurd suggestion that such machinery has or might come to have mind, let alone the idea, equally disturbed, I think, that we are ourselves, in fact, such machines, different only in that we are the result of biological evolution rather than its technological counterpart. The AI fantasy has many sources. I will now mention 2. Some thinkers have been impressed by the thought that the idea that living beings are special, somehow set apart from physics and technology, is an outmoded relic of a sentimental anthropomorphism. These thinkers are struck by the idea that, now unleashed, AI is beyond our control, fast, microscopic, distributed, and astronomically complex. This technology seems to have transcended us and come to have power of us. It's a new kind of artificial, real agency in the world. But this power of technology is nothing new. The story of technology, its history, from prehistory until now has always been that of the ways we are entrained by, that is to say, governed by, tools and systems of our own devising. Think of the pathways we lay down in walking. To every tool, there is a corresponding habit, that is, an automatized way of acting and being. From the pencil to the printing press to the internet, our human agency is enacted in part by the creation of social and technological landscapes that in turn transform what we can do and so seem to threaten to govern or to control us. So I think it is one thing to appreciate the ways we make and remake ourselves through cultural transformation of our worlds via tool use and technology, and another to mystify dumb matter put to work by us. If there's intelligence in the vicinity of pencils, the internet, cigarette lighters, maps, or calculators, it's the intelligence of their users and their makers. The digital is no different. But there is another origin of our impulse to concede mind to devices of our own invention, and I think this is more widespread. This is the tendency of many scientists to take for granted what I think of as an overly simplistic picture of human and animal cognitive life. They rely on a conception of human activity, skill, and cognitive accomplishment, according to which, roughly, to speak a language, or to play a game, or to make art, is to master a system of rules, to embody norms about how to go on. And in fact, what I think, and this is, I'm going to come back to this at the end, what I want to offer you tonight is distinctive of human life and performance is that norms, rules, systems, patterns, all of these are problems for us. We struggle to conform to them, even as we also find ourselves resisting them, and in resisting them, transforming them, our society, and ourselves. What many scientists in the AI research field, but also I think many neuroscientists and cognitive scientists seem to have forgotten, at least in some contexts, is that the human animal is a creature of disturbance. The mid-20th century philosopher of biology, Hans Jonas, put it like this: irritability is the germ, as it were the atom, of having a world. With us, there is, so to speak, always a pebble in the shoe. And this is what moves us, turns us, orients us to reorient ourselves, to do things differently so that we might carry on. It is irritation and disorientation that is the source of our concern. In the absence of disturbance, in the absence of concern, there is nothing. No art, no language, no games, no goals, no tasks, no world, no consciousness. Now, if you're like me, you will experience something at once fascinating and gripping about this AI question that I've posed. How could we even think that these machines might have minds? But also at the same time, something depressing and boring about it. This particular fantasy that we are machines and that machines are somehow overwhelming us is not new. So I'd like to propose in my talk this evening to try to approach the issue from the side. I want to discuss a question about images and their nature, in particular the idea of the relation of image and art, in order to shed light on image in relation to artificial intelligence. And then finally say something about the importance of images in relation to what it is to be human. So I now turn to that, which is really my main topic. Now, although this is not marked in ordinary language, or, I believe, in the special usage of language of artists, art historians, scientists, philosophers, there's a distinction to be drawn between two fundamentally different kinds of image. And I think, and I hope to persuade you that this is right, I think that there's something astonishing, really remarkable, about the fact that the distinction I have in mind and that I'm about to explain to you has been neglected, even almost entirely overlooked. And I think this has also been the source of real confusion. So in order to mark the distinction, since it's not a distinction we regularly draw, I have to use language in a slightly different way. And so I will use two different English words. I will use the word image for one kind of image and picture for another, or for the other. Now, I should say that this is sort of an amusing encounter with the very problem I'm interested in discussing. The actual English lecture that I gave, the actual English title that I gave my lecture for you this evening is Images and Pictures in Art and in Artificial Intelligence. And I chose this title in order to bring out very clearly three different things: images, pictures, art, and then artificial intelligence. But this intention was lost in the Spanish title, since both image and picture got translated as the same word. So we have la imagen en el arte y en la inteligencia artificial. Now, this is not a limitation of Spanish, but so far as I can tell, is pretty much the case in all the languages with which I'm familiar. In English, there are two words, picture and image, but in fact, they're used interchangeably, which is just to say that the puzzle I want to share with you, or the distinction I want to make, is a conceptual one. It's not a linguistic one. Okay, enough preamble. Images, as I propose to use this term, are natural phenomena. They are very common. Indeed, they are cheap. For example, there is an image of the sky in the surface of the pond, but also on the surface of the puddle, and also on the surface of the glass that sits in the middle of the puddle. Images are not made. They happen. We stumble upon them. Like the reflection on the pond's surface, images are sometimes visible. When an image is visible, we are afforded new opportunities for visual perception, for visual exploration. You can literally see the sky in the pond's surface, even though when we turn to the pond, we turn away from the sky. Images in this sense belong to the world. We see in them, we see through them, we see with them. Some philosophers and scientists have, I think, been misled by the fact that we can in this way explore the world through images into thinking that we only ever see images. Indeed, in certain segments of the philosophical world, it's common to hear people say things like, vision is learning about the world from images. I think this is a mistaken idea, and one way to appreciate what's wrong with it is to consider for a moment the case of the mirror. It is well known that actually it's a mark of cognitive sophistication even to be able to recognize oneself in the mirror. Dogs and cats reportedly can't do this. Dolphins, elephants, chimpanzees, people do this very well. In the case of people, maybe we do it too well. We spend a lot of time in front of the mirror. And if you've ever tried to shave or apply makeup in front of a mirror, you know that it's an acquired skill. It's difficult to use what you see in a mirror to guide your movements, or driving is another good example. So I think it's important to acknowledge 2 points here. One is that understanding reflections is a bona fide way of expanding our visual powers, but also that seeing with reflections or mirrors is different from ordinary direct seeing, and that's a good thing, because we want to hold on to the idea that when I look at you, I'm not looking at your image, I'm looking at you. Now, I've mentioned mirrors. Mirrors might seem to disprove my claim that images are found but not made. But a mirror, I think, should not be thought of as a device for making images, nor are mirror reflections artificial images. A mirror is just a shiny reflective surface. We contrive with mirrors to let images happen. Some images are visible, as I've been saying, but not all images are visible. I think the concept of an image is more general than that. We speak, for example, of the retinal image, and by this we mean the pattern of neural stimulation produced by light on the surface of the retina. There is an image of the immediate environment on the surface of the retina. It's a kind of point-for-point topographic isomorphism. Moreover, this image is causally necessary for normal vision. But this image is not itself visible. First of all, it's inside the eye, so it is hidden from view both from the outside and from the inside. But even the ophthalmologist, who is actually able to look inside your eye and examine the surface of the retina, does not see an image there. Or rather, if he does, it's the reflection of his instruments. It's not the retinal image he's looking for. So the retina just is not the right kind of surface to reflect a visible image, but there is an image there. At the most general level, I think, images are mappings or projections. There's a mathematical and physical science of the image, and we call that optics. Optics concerns the geometry of rays of light and the behavior of functions from domains onto codomains. Indeed, another name in mathematics for the codomain of a function, in English anyway, is precisely image, the image domain. So optics studies how images are formed and how they behave. So to summarize my first point, images are natural occurrences. They are mappings governed by both mathematical and physical principles. Some images are visible. Some images are causally efficacious, even though they're not visible, like the retinal image. And there's probably an infinity of images that exist invisibly around us, that if we had the right instruments, we could determine their nature. And optics is the theory of all that. So images, we may say, are optical phenomena par excellence. Okay, now I turn to the second sense, for which I will use exclusively the English word picture, and I've collaborated with the interpreter that she does the same. Pictures are something entirely different. They are not images in the sense that I've been explaining. Pictures, unlike images, are not naturally occurring phenomena. They are rather artifacts. Whereas images are found, we stumble upon them, pictures are made, produced, designed, built, constructed, fabricated. They are rendered, drafted, or executed. A picture, like a word, is a human act, or we may say it is the trace of human actions, the product of many decisions. Whereas images, at the most basic level, are naturally occurring phenomena, projections or reflections, pictures are a kind of technology. This has important consequences, many of which are familiar. First, as with all technologies, picture technology has a history. We invented picture-making techniques We learned to make pictures, just as each of us has learned to use pictures, that is, to see them with comprehension, to find them intelligible. It is worth noting that we need to learn to understand images too, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but I think it's important, and I think you'll see this as we go on, that what we learn when we learn to understand an image is different from what we learn when we learn to understand a picture. A second point, pictures, and this is again very familiar, especially to the artists and art historians in the room, pictures have style, and so they have style histories. To encounter a picture is to encounter something that occupies manifestly a place in a range of known styles, and every picture manifestly refers to that background of stylistic possibilities against which it stands out. Pictures bear the marks of maker, time and place, as well as of interests, concerns, and values. There are no natural pictures. There are no style-free pictures. All images are natural. All images are style-free. A third point, which I've already gestured at, pictures are not merely products of human artifacts. They are tools. They are themselves instruments. We use pictures. What do we use pictures for? That's not an easy question to answer. The hypothesis that I want to share with you tonight is that at the most general level, a picture is a tool for showing. It's a tool for putting something on display. And whereas I can genuinely see something in an image, as when I see the sky and the pond, with pictures, it is always rather a question of what someone is showing me, or what is being put on display for me. And this is related to a crucial further point, which is that pictures, and we don't notice this because we take it for granted, pictures always function in the setting of communication. When someone shows me something in a picture, they're not just presenting me with the world, as it were by way of an image, as, for example, they would be if they said, look. No, a picture is always an invitation to direct one's attention to a specific something. Pictures curate. Pictures isolate. Pictures thematize. Pictures show. It is not an accident that in many, many contexts, pictures come with captions. The caption tells you what is in the picture. It tells you what you're supposed to be paying attention to. And even when there is no caption, I would suggest, there is always an implicit caption. So you come to my house and you see the picture on the wall. This is my grandmother. This is my boyfriend. Or on my Instagram, this is the fabulous cocktail I had last night. So although pictures don't themselves speak, they operate in a rhetorical setting. And it is invariably the case that in order to see a picture with comprehension, to see what it shows you, you need, in a sense, to already know what it's trying to show you. You need to already know what it is about. The 20th century philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein actually makes this very point in a very vivid way. He gave the example of how I can point to something, let's say a vase, in order to show you what it is, a vase, but with exactly the same gesture I could say, I can point to its color, or I could point to its size, or I could point to its shape, or I could point to its position, or I could point to the distinctive kind of vase it is as opposed to other kinds of vase. What secures the meaning of that gesture, what disambiguates it, and in normal life it's perfectly disambiguated, what secures that meaning is the communicative context in which the demonstration occurs. Absent that context, the gesture is only an empty gesture. And so I believe with pictures. They show what they show against the background of a communicative context. When you're confronted with a picture that is devoid of a clear communicative intention, a context, a rhetoric, a caption, then no matter how definite and precise in terms of line and form, such a picture shows nothing. It isn't really a picture at all, but a kind of pictorial misfire. So now, crucially, whereas images, in my sense, are dime a dozen, cheap, pictures are precious. They are creatures of human exchange and communication, and they have no life whatsoever without that broader context. I said that pictures are precious. I sometimes wonder whether the ease with which we can now make pictures with our telephones cheapens them. I think that's a question we might come back to. Okay, so to summarize, whereas pictures are natural phenomena with their own dedicated theory, optics, pictures are cultural and historical. They are artifacts, and the history of pictures is the history of technology. And the history of technology, and this is important to appreciate, it will become important as I go on, is the history of a kind of social organization and control. For technology requires that we learn it, that is to say, that we habituate it, that we automatize it, that we master it. So technologies always demand that we learn to be creatures of the technology, that in some sense we're governed by it or even enslaved by it. So to learn a technology is to come to embody the technology's demands. And pictures are that way. All right. Having now taken the time to convince you that there's a difference here, I want to just spend a moment showing that, in fact, in daily life, the distinction gets blurred and why it gets blurred. It gets blurred in many ways. I'm only going to discuss two what I think of as very interesting ways. One is this. In the last several centuries, 400, 500, 600 years, we have learned ways of using images to make pictures out of them. We make pictures with or out of images. That's what a photographic camera is, or a digital camera. That is to say, a camera is a mechanism for harnessing the natural power of images for the purpose of making a picture out of it. The camera itself is not a picture-making machine. It's not even an image-making machine, for, on my view, images are not made. They occur. It's a device for staging images so that we can work with them or play with them for the purpose of making a picture. But before there were cameras, and now there's a very interesting history here that I think people in this room know much better than I, and I'm going to leave it aside anyway, but I just want to mention it. But before there were cameras, there were other techniques of picture making that involved working with images, such as artificial perspective. Artificial perspective, on my way of thinking about it, is applied optics. It puts the theory of the image to work in the manufacture of pictures. Specifically, it supplies a method for figuring out possible or actual, that is to say, virtual images. For example, it's a procedure that actually lets you calculate relative shapes and sizes in a corresponding image imagined on a plane perpendicular to the line of sight. It is a manual or formal device for doing what we might also do with lenses. So the entanglement of pictures and images is even more complicated in today's world. And there are questions in this vicinity that deserve close attention. Just to mention a few, when a human drone pilot drives the machine to its target, are they relying on pictures or images to reach the target? When you watch your child's musical performance at school through the screen on your camera, are you seeing images of your kid? Pictures of your kid? When graphemes are generated by generative AI? Are these pictures or images? I'm not going to try to answer these questions, but I want to underscore that precisely what makes them interesting, what makes them difficult, is that there really is a difference here between pictures, these tools, these instruments, these artifacts, these meaningful creations of ours, and images which belong really to the world of physics. Now, I myself, as a writer, and a lot of my writing has been sort of purely philosophically, but I've spent a lot of time also working in collaboration with an audience of cognitive psychologists and perceptual psychologists. I myself have not always been so clear about this distinction, and I want to just take a moment to reflect on that, because it will help me also bring out some themes that are part of what makes this distinction interesting in the first place. In earlier writing, I used to criticize what I called the snapshot or picture conception of seeing. Specifically, I took aim at the idea that visual experience, that when I see you, it's like having a mental picture of you, a mental picture of all of this, in which all the detail is represented in sharp focus and uniform resolution from the center out to the periphery, somehow in my mind. I still think that this is a problematic idea. When I see you all now, you show up for me as present, but not as in here in a picture, but as out there. And you're all present in different ways. Some of you are deep in shadow over here on the right, whereas others are more brightly illuminated over here on my left. And some of you are focal and some of you are background. The idea that it's a kind of uniform rendering in my mind strikes me as a kind of fiction. But what I realize now is that I should have called this, I think, misguided way of thinking about what vision is, not as the misguided picture conception of seeing, but as the misguided image conception of seeing. For what I was criticizing was, in effect, the idea that seeing itself is an optical process, that to see somehow is to be on the receiving end of images. I think there's very good reason to believe that vision is not an optical process. We don't see images, nor is vision confined to the kinds of projective properties that show up in images. If you define what is visible in terms of what projects to the eyes, vision, and this sounds almost paradoxical, vision is not confined to the visible. For example, we visually experience frequently more than projects to the eyes. We experience the hidden parts of the things we see. You have a sense not just of the surfaces of things, you have a sense of their whole presence, and you have a sense not only of how things look, but you also have a sense in your visual consciousness of what they are. I see a person, not merely just an image. So I think we see more than would be available in a corresponding image. And it's also true that we see much less frequently than is available in the image. Human beings are often distracted or uninterested or lazy. We go through life barely noticing half of what there is around us to see, or what might be recorded in an image. I don't see the keys that I'm looking for, even when they are right there on the table in front of me, and even though light from those keys has been reflected onto my retina. Another example, this audience of art lovers knows very well that we may fail entirely to see qualities of a painting, even though the painting is right there in front of us, and we're scanning it with our eyes. It can take work to engage the painting, just as it does your keys on the table in front of you. Let me actually make an aside about this. As you know, it is sometimes possible to see underneath the surface of a painting by the use of X-rays, infrared, as well as other means of chemical analysis. This is something that I've been learning about this week here at the Prado. And this kind of technical work can allow for important discoveries and can play an interesting role in the preservation, restoration, and also the understanding of pictures. But it's also, I just want to emphasize an obvious fact, a general feature of human perception that we find it difficult to see even what is entirely open to view, even what is not hidden. To bring what is there on the surface, to move from not seeing what is there to seeing it, or from seeing what is there to seeing it differently, can require effort, attention, concentration, and really the deployment of something that deserves to be thought of as aesthetic consciousness. And at least part of the value of art is precisely that it gives us the opportunity not just to move from not seeing to seeing, or from seeing to seeing differently, but to catch ourselves in the act of doing it and to watch how we accomplish the presence of the art object. But that's a digression. My main point right now is this. Vision, I believe, is not optical because seeing is not something that happens in the light eye-brain system. It is something that the person or animal enacts or performs. To see something is to take an interest in it. And so it is, and this is key, to enter into relationship with it. It is to orient oneself to it, or in response to it. It is to concern oneself with it. As perceivers, we don't represent or reflect the world inside as we would if vision were just a matter of the occurrence of images in the head. Rather, we reach toward it, we hold it, sometimes we caress it. To see something is to accomplish the visual presence of something and to sustain a relationship with it. So what I've now realized then is that although the image conception of seeing, according to which we have sort of static image-like representations in our mind, is really a mistake, the picture conception of seeing, in a way, is true. That is, there is something profoundly pictorial about seeing. And for two reasons. First, making a picture of something, and I mean photographing it or drawing it, it doesn't matter, painting it. In fact, for my purposes, sculpting it would be just as much an example of this. Making a picture of something is an exercise in the work of seeing it. To make a picture of something is to engage it. It is to achieve intimacy with it. The picture is precisely a personal expression or manifestation of this encounter. This is obviously true when we think of drawing or painting. Here the designer has to practically drape themselves over the object that they're drawing. But I think it's also true even with the cell phone. We photograph things in part because we use, and now I'm talking about the excessive use of the cell phone, we photograph things in part because we use picture making to organize our attention. It isn't that we avoid looking by making pictures. It's that picture making is a special way of focusing on what we see and so enhancing what we see. And so maybe that's why the parents stare at the screens of their cameras while they're witnessing their children's live performances. It's a way of concentrating on the pictures. And this actually then raises, I think is relevant to the question of the Prado's ban on picture taking. So in general, to make a picture of a thing is to concern oneself with it in a remarkably intimate way. This is why we find ourselves so often compelled to photograph that plate of food, or that friend, or that lover, or that painting in the gallery. Seeing is a making activity in just the way that painting drawing, and photography can be. Now, there's a second sense in which I think seeing is interestingly pictorial. Pictures influence the way we see. They train us up on certain ways of reflecting on visuality. Art historian Anne Hollander put it like this: the picture gives the standard by which the direct awareness is assessed. And this is why Whitney Davis, reworking words of Wolflin, can rightly claim that there's a sense in which vision itself has an art history. All right. Now, Plato, in his attack on art in the Republic, insisted that it's easy to make pictures of anything. You just hold up a mirror. That's all there is to making a picture. Art is no more than this sort of play with images. Plato was mistaken, I think, and 3 times over. At least if we take his argument at face value. Mirror images are not pictures, as I've been arguing. Making pictures is actually very difficult. And even with the cell phone, making good pictures is extremely difficult. And finally, the work of the artist, even the pictorial artist, is not that of making pictures. And that's the point I turn to now. So now I move beyond the question of images versus pictures, and I ask, what makes some pictures, but not all, works of art? So this museum is dedicated to, not to pictures as such, but to artworks. What is it really that makes some pictures, but not others, artworks? Now here I think the discussion earlier about pictures as technology and the controlling role that technology has in our lives is crucial. I stressed before that pictures are technology. Both the making and using of pictures, in whatever medium, is a culturally embedded and settled communicative activity. And it actually has been so, we know, for millennia. We are fluent with pictures in personal as well as in commercial transactions. Think of the pictures of cars in advertisements, or of the photos of grandma on the shelf, or of the selfies we take together. Not to mention the superabundance of pictures streaming on social media. These pictures, as we've seen, carry explicit or implicit captions, and their meaning and content, what they show, is secured, usually by these captions. We seldom need to think twice. There's almost never any need to think twice when it comes to seeing what these pictures show. This is really a remarkable fact. We forget how remarkable this is. Something so artificial, something so historical and manufactured, so specifically cultural, has for us the quality of self-evidence and naturalness. And this is explained, ultimately, by the fact not only that pictures have been engineered for us, but that we ourselves have been organized for pictures through habit and through custom. I think there's really an interesting way in which we're trained for pictoriality just the way we're trained for literacy. Now, none of this applies to art. Art pictures are entirely different. The art picture says no, or rather it says pause. Art pictures refuse transparency, they refuse intimacy, they refuse self-evidence, they resist being labeled. They present themselves always as questions rather than as self-evidences. Habit and mastery of the background don't suffice to let you know the artwork, or to let you know what it is, or know what would count somehow as it's being a successful or unsuccessful version of what it is. You cannot sight read an artwork. No caption can suffice to tell you what the artwork really is. The art picture and this is a positive feature of it, is always a potential headache. It's always a problem for us. It stops us short and defies us. Art pictures resemble pictures for all the world, but unlike ordinary pictures, they refuse to participate in the domestic economy of picture making. They elide the background rhetorics and methods of captioning that make pictures pictures. The art picture, in a way, is always a stranger, a strange picture. Instead of showing us something, it confronts us with all that we take for granted in our normal exchanges and deployments with pictures. Artworks disrupt the habitual patterns of organization that make pictoriality possible. And so art pictures both disorganize us and miraculously give us an opportunity to reorganize ourselves. Art pictures are not demonstrations, mere communicative acts, as pictures are. They are rather liberators. The artwork picture resists just being seen in the habitual way. And so it demands of you that you change yourself so that you may, as it were, invent or devise or come up with, finally, new ways of seeing it, new ways of knowing it for yourself originally. Your engagement with the artwork picture is an anti-technological act. It is a resistance to the way that ordinary pictorial technology would govern you. Technology, as I said before, is always a system of control. Your engagement with an artwork is always an act of self-making and creation. So we come to a kind of beautiful paradox now. Artwork pictures, in a way, have nothing at all to do with pictures, for they are not pictures in the conventional sense. They are anti-pictures or strange tools. They're pictures that are divorced from the kinds of contexts that alone could give them self-evidence, transparency, immediacy, that alone could let them function the way pictures function as pictures. But at the same time, and I delight in this further fact, artwork pictures have everything to do with pictures, for it's only because we are organized by pictures, it's only because we are pictorial creatures living in a pictorial world that making art pictures that can liberate us from all that even has any point at all. It is because pictures hold us captive in the ways that technology always does that gives art pictures their raison d'etre. We make art out of life. I don't mean that art is about life, as if life supplies its subject matter or topic, although that is sometimes the case. I mean something subtler. Art rather life, all the systems and habits and ways in which we're organized, gives art not so much its subject matter as its raw materials. We make art out of pictures just as we make pictures out of images. And remarkably, in making art, we are really making and remaking ourselves again and again. Art and life are entangled, and finally, we human beings are products of our own making. We take shape and take shape again and again and again in new ways, thanks to entanglement and resistance. Now, having spent the last 2 weeks here in the Prado, visiting with paintings in the galleries, and spending many hours fruitfully talking with curators and scholars and conservators here in the museum, I'm very well aware that there is so much more than one could say about the art in artworks that have their home in this building than I have said. My formula that art pictures disrupt the background conditions that make ordinary pictures possible, and that they both disclose us to ourselves and also at the same time give us resources to understand ourselves and also give us resources so that we may change. This is intended, this formula, to be very general, very high altitude, and thus very far removed from the work of any individual artist working with individual materials at any particular time. It's also intended to be, as I think of it, vertical. That is, I focus not on art's endless conversation with other art, but rather with art's endless conversation with life. So I don't pretend for a minute, this is sort of an apology, I don't pretend for a minute that this characterization here is exhaustive or all-purpose, but I think it does bring out something that is definitive of art's basic work, namely that art liberates us by disorganizing us in the face of the world's organization of us. And crucially, it is this key feature of art that we need to understand to appreciate why, in fact, AI cannot participate in the art-making process. So let us turn our attention, and now this is the final part of the talk, the shortest part of the talk. Let us turn our attention back to the question of AI. John Dewey, the mid-20th century American philosopher, wrote these words: "By one of the ironic perversities that so often attend affairs, the existence of the works of art upon which the formation of an aesthetic theory depends has become an obstruction to theory about them." I'm going to read that twice because it's a very complicated thought. By one of the ironic perversities that so often attend affairs, the existence of the works of art upon which the formation of an aesthetic theory depends have become an obstruction to theory about them, an obstruction to theory about them. His point is important but very straightforward. With art, it's not about the thing. It's not about the object, it's about the experience. Or rather, for he had no simple or reductive notion of what an experience is, it's about the work we do with the art and the ways it occasions us precisely to engage it truly. And in engaging it, and the ways doing so gives us opportunities to grow, to change, to respond. That's what art is. That's what art names. Art's true medium is our very humanness. The painter may be pushing paint around on the surface of the canvas, but what the painter is really pushing around, the painter's true medium, is ideas, or more particularly, the ways we are ourselves put together and assembled in the activity of our own lives as makers. So framed this way, I hope we can begin to understand first not only why there is no place for computers, large language models, whatever, in our lives with art, but second, why the very idea that computers might themselves one day make art reflects a profound short-sightedness or misunderstanding about what art is and what it tells us about ourselves. So as for the first point, a computer can no more make a work of art than it can scratch an itch. Not because it can't direct an arm to the right location, but because it has no itches. It has no needs. It has no cravings. And so finally, no motives. Life, our lives, but I think all of life, exists in a space of care and motive. And crucially, we make art to cope with the conditions in which we find ourselves. Computers don't have conditions they need to cope with. Now, everything I've said here leaves entirely open what is no doubt also certainly the case, that we, on the ground of our itches, our needs, our curiosities, our motives, can and no doubt will make art using computers. And even when the computers seem to be quasi-agents, generating texts or graphical constructions which are materially identical to stories, pictures, or artworks that we might have generated, they will not have created stories, pictures, or artworks. For they are always our stories, our pictures, our artworks. We enact them, we initiate them, we appreciate them. It is our concerns, it can only ever be our concerns that animate them. If the computer plays a role at all, it is merely that of implement, that of tool with which we can scratch our own itches, cope with our own irritations, learn about and change our own selves. But as to the second point, it also begins to be clear, I think, that the science of AI, as I said earlier, has taken for granted an impoverished conception of the person. What is distinctive of us is not that we talk, think, play games, make art, perceive, but rather how mightily we struggle to do all that. The human chess player does not merely execute moves as best as he or she can in light of a knowledge of the strategy, history, tactics, whatever, of the game. The human chess player struggles to play, struggles to concentrate in the face of competitive pressures and anxiety produced by the conflicts of play. For the human game is a site of conflict. It's a site of work. It's a site of actualization. It's a site of competition. It's a testing ground. I think this is really a general fact about us. Take the case of language very briefly. We don't just talk, blindly following rules. Talking is always an issue for us, and the rules, such as they are up for grabs and in dispute. We always, inevitably and from the beginning, are made to cope with how hard talking is, how liable we are to misunderstand each other. Although most of the time this is taken matter-of-factly and without undue stress. To talk, almost inevitably, is to question word choice, to demand reformulation, repetition, and repair. What did you mean? How can you say that? In this way, talking contains within it, from the very start, and as one of its basic modes, the activities of criticism and reflection about talking, which end up changing the way we talk. We don't just act and mindlessly go with the flow. Flow eludes us, and in its place we know striving, argument, negotiation. We change language in using language, and that's what a language is, a place of capture and release, engagement and criticism, a never-ending process of negotiation, accommodation, resistance, and innovation. We can never factor out mere doing, skillfulness, habit, from how these doings, engagements, and skills are made new and transformed through our very acts of doing them, or even resisting doing them. So if we keep language in view and don't lose sight of what I'm calling the entanglement, that is, the ways in which carrying on is tangled up with everything required to deal with just how hard it is to carry on, then it becomes clear that the AI discussion tends to presuppose a sort of one-sided peaches and cream simplification of human skillfulness and cognitive life, as if speaking were just the straightforward application of rules, just putting sentences together that make sense in an appropriate way. But to imagine language users who are not also actively, maybe even anxiously, struggling with, and so in a sense resisting language, would be to imagine something which is at best a kind of shell of language, which is what machine language is. It's the shell of language. Language in a way, and these are just my very last sentences, language in a way is like dance. It is hot work, and play, undertaken by live bodies under the felt pressure of their needs, insecurities, desires, and offerings. With language we make, we flirt, criticize, negotiate, we pray, we hug, we love, we fight, we dominate. Language is interwoven with every form of human being. Now, computers, I believe, talk the way they dance, which is to say they don't. No computer speaks, not only because no computer has anything to say, but because no computer, when it produces text, ever has to search for the right word. And computers make art the way they speak, which is to say they don't. Computers cannot and will not participate in the fruitful entanglement of art and life. And that's true even if, as is surely the case, computers end up playing a vital role in the production, consumption, and transmission of art. Artworks are not things, as Dewey appreciated. They are problems. They are problems for the makers of art, and they are problems for the consumers of art. They are problems for us. Thank you very much.